What if I told you that some of the greatest minds in history practiced being poor on purpose? Not because they had to, but because they wanted to be free. Seneca was one of the richest men in Rome. He owned villas, had servants, controlled fortunes, and once a month he would dress in rags, sleep on the floor, and eat only bread and water. His friends thought he was insane, but he wasn't preparing for poverty. He was preparing for freedom. If you've ever felt the shame of being broke, the fear of losing everything, or the weight of comparing your bank account to everyone else's, this video will change how you see poverty forever. Let's be honest about something most people won't say out loud. You're not really afraid of hard work. You're not even afraid of failure. You're afraid of being poor. You're afraid of the shame, the looks, the questions. What happened to you? Why can't you get it together? Don't you want more out of life? You're afraid of watching everyone else move forward while you stay stuck. Afraid of being the friend who can't afford dinner, the family member who needs help, the person people whisper about. And so you hustle, you grind, you chase promotions and side hustles and investment schemes, not because you love money, but because you're terrified of not having it. The Stoics understood this fear. They lived in a world just as brutal as ours, a world where poverty meant real danger, where losing your wealth could mean losing everything, your status, your safety, your dignity. But they discovered something that changed everything. They learned that the fear of poverty was worse than poverty itself. And once you stop being afraid of being poor, no one can control you ever again. Seneca, the wealthiest philosopher in Rome, had a practice that confused everyone around him. Once a month, he would strip away all his comforts. He'd wear his worst clothes, sleep on a hard surface, eat the cheapest food available, plain bread, maybe some water. His friends asked him, "Why are you doing this? You're rich. You've earned your comfort." And Seneca would reply, "I'm not practicing poverty because I expect to be poor. I'm practicing poverty so that I stop being afraid." He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, so that it may be a test of yourself instead of merely a hobby." This wasn't about suffering for suffering's sake. This was strategic, because Seneca knew something most people never figure out. The fear of losing something controls you more than actually losing it ever could. When you've tasted the worst, when you've actually lived on bread and water for a week, when you've slept on the floor, when you've worn the same clothes for days, you realize something shocking. You survived. You were okay. The world didn't end. And suddenly, the thing you were most afraid of loses all its power. Now let me tell you about a man who had nothing. Epictetus was born a slave, not struggling financially poor, literally owned by another human being. His name wasn't even his own. Epictetus just means acquired one. He was lame in one leg, possibly from abuse or torture. He had no money, no freedom, no future. And he became one of the freest men who ever lived. How? Because Epictetus realized that poverty could take everything from him except one thing, his mind. He said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Think about that. A slave, a man who owned literally nothing, teaching philosophy about wealth. But he understood something billionaires today still don't get. You're not poor because you don't have enough. You're poor because you want too much. When Epictetus was eventually freed and became a teacher, he lived in a small hut with almost no possessions, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Students would come to him stressed about money, about status, about what people thought of them, and he would ask them, "What do you actually need to survive? Food? You can get bread. Shelter? A simple room. Clothing? One set will do. Everything else," he'd say, "is just your opinion about what you should have. Your poverty isn't the problem.
your judgment about poverty is. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, emperor of Rome, commanded armies, lived in palaces, had access to anything money could buy. And every single night, in his private journal, he reminded himself that he could lose it all tomorrow. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." An emperor writing to himself about how little he actually needs. Marcus constantly practiced what Stoics called premeditation malorum, imagining the worst-case scenario, not to be pessimistic, but to prepare mentally. He would imagine losing his empire, his wealth, his status, everything. And then he would ask himself, could I still be a good person? Could I still have peace? Could I still be free? The answer was always yes, because Marcus understood what Seneca and Epictetus knew. External things are temporary. Character is forever. You can lose your money. You can lose your house. You can lose your job, your reputation, your status. But no one can take away who you choose to be in the face of loss. That's the freedom the Stoics were after. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you're not choosing poverty like Seneca. Maybe poverty chose you. Maybe you're broke and scared and ashamed, and you didn't sign up for this. Here's what the Stoics would tell you. First, your worth is not in your wallet. Epictetus was a slave with nothing. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor with everything. Both found the same peace, because peace doesn't come from what you own. It comes from knowing you'll be okay, even if you lose it all. Second, practice voluntary discomfort. You don't have to wait for life to take everything from you. Take something from yourself first. Eat simple meals for a week. Skip luxuries you think you need. Sleep somewhere uncomfortable. Wear the same outfit for days. Not to punish yourself, but to prove to yourself, I can handle this. I'm stronger than I think. Third, redefine wealth. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." You know what real wealth is? Not being afraid, not needing validation, not comparing yourself to others, having enough and knowing it. That's richer than any billionaire who's still chasing the next thing. The Stoics weren't afraid of being poor because they had already rehearsed it. They had already lived it. They had already faced the thing everyone else runs from. And they discovered the truth. Poverty can take your money, but it can't take your courage. It can't take your integrity. It can't take your ability to show up and try again. You might be broke right now. You might lose everything tomorrow, but you will never be poor in the ways that actually matter unless you choose to be. Remember, you are not what you own. You are what you cannot lose. If this changed how you see poverty, subscribe to this channel. Together, we will build an army of minds that refuse to give up. Comment below, what's one lesson this video has taught you? And remember, the Stoics weren't superhuman. They were just willing to face what you're facing right now.